Are you gentlemen ready?
Oh, I guess so.
All right, three, two,
Starting soon.
one. Just die already! Just do it! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 57th episode of Tuesdays with Moire. If you haven't guessed yet, or if you haven't seen Seinfeld, we're talking about The English Patient, along with Ivan's Childhood and The Messenger from 2009, not to be mistaken with 2018's indie game. I'm your host, Ian Taylor. Join me tonight as my wonderful co-host, Devin Kane, and my co-co-host and event organizer, Stephen Beeson. How are you guys doing tonight?
I just watched The English Patient. How do you think I feel? Yeah.
So we know his thoughts already. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm
R-
sorry.
Way to bury the lead, Mr. Beeson.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, well, I wish this movie would have buried its lead about an hour early. Ooh,
Ayo.
All right, let's. Shall we jump right into this? We actually, it's funny. We didn't discuss. Normally, when we do the podcast, we like when we're off the air, we're about to go on. We're like, okay, I'm going to introduce this movie. So what? Like, who wants to introduce what movie? Let's start there.
I want to introduce The English Patient.
I'll do Ivan's Childhood.
Yeah.
Oh boy, The Messenger. Okay, let's go, boys.
All right, beginning with Ivan's Childhood, since it's the oldest film and the first Tarkovsky film I've ever seen. Take it away.
Same.
It's also the first film that Tarkovsky ever made.
Hey.
So, Ivan's Childhood is a 1962 film from Russia, which is the origin of all that commie gobbledygook that Stephen loves so much. But in spite of that, this is I think a beautiful film. I'll read a quick synopsis right off of the Criterion channel, which I streamed it on this evening. But here, so the debut feature by the great Andrei Tarkovsky, Ivan's Childhood, is a poetic journey through the shards and shadows of one boy's war-ravaged youth, moving back and forth between the traumatic realities of World War II and serene moments of family life before the conflict began. Tarkovsky's film remains one of the most jarring and unforgettable depictions of the impacts of war on children. So this is a continuation of our theme from last week where we're looking at war films. And last year, when we went to World War II, we did look at films about the war from the child's perspective. And this would have absolutely fit into that bill because, I don't know, just something about looking at war from a child's perspective. Either they're really ignorant of the situation and it becomes very tragic when they learn about it and they have to grow up really, really fast. Or they get killed, and that's a tragedy in and of itself. There's just something about looking at war from a perspective of a child that I just find so much more engaging and heartbreaking. Where so many war films these days kind of miss the mark, I think, in terms of really putting you in their perspective. And I think this film, off the bat, with its dream sequences, which people can go either way about, either they love them or they're like, get the fuck out of here with that shit. I think it really brings you into like Ivan's point of view as an innocent child who's thrown right into the horrors of war, where we learn that his family was killed and he survived, and he's out doing these little runs across places that adults can't. So he's being utilized in the war despite having lost basically everything, and he's still fighting to be involved. And I just think this is a beautiful film. It's a fantastic debut feature from Tarkovsky, which I think he only excelled his career in since. And this was interesting because he made this film basically just to prove himself if he could do this filmmaking thing. Like, he adopted it from this short story called Ivan, which he later admitted when writing his book, Mosaic in Time, that he didn't find the original source material that great, like it wasn't that well written, but he chose it because he found that easier to adapt to film. And there is something to be said about taking a story where there's potential for an idea, but maybe it's not that well written, and being able to use that as a springboard for taking creative liberties and building your own cinematic language, which I think this film does.
reminds me of Stanley Kubrick and The Shining.
It reminds me a lot of
Basically.
Come and See. Like I can see how. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think they both came from the same school of cinematography in Russia. Like Mosfilm is behind both of these films, and you can see that
Wow.
there's some similarities. And that's like the one good thing I think about communism, or at least, you had these.
America is.
No. It's the one thing is that they actually gave funding to filmmakers and actually supported their vision. As long as they didn't criticize the government, they could do anything they wanted.
Yeah, and not get
That's the only
assassinated like
stipulation.
the director, who was it, of Ivan the Terrible. He got assassinated before making part 3 because his films were so anti-government.
Oh,
I
boy.
forgot the director's name.
Yeah, I mean,
there was another.
Other than that caveat, I think they funded some great films back in the day.
What was it? Oh God, Pasolini, who was assassinated for Sodom.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's another one, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not surprised there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I like this film a lot. I haven't seen Tarkovsky films before. I have Stalker on Criterion. I've been meaning to watch it, but I keep putting it off. It's one of those movies I want to put myself in the right mindset for. I can't just dive right into it, throw it on with the family and be like, hey, you want to watch this depressing 3-hour Russian movie? Like, no, I gotta be in the right mindset just to get into it. And, this film was kind of the same thing, but I watched it on YouTube, so I'm sorry I watched it on my fucking phone. I know, David Lynch. I'm sorry. There was no other way I could watch it without buying the expensive Criterion. But after watching it,
yeah.
I feel like I should buy a Criterion because I liked it a lot. It was a very, very haunting experience, very lonely movie. Like, this movie captures just the loneliness of war very well, and that's not something enough war films really get into, just how alone in this world you really feel after it's torn itself apart.
So I had seen this film before when I was in London in school there. They had a bunch of Criterion films that you could just borrow out, and I just went ham on that. And one of the films I borrowed out was Ivan's Childhood, and I fell in love with it. I think I had seen Stalker before then, a little bit of Andrei Rublev and Solaris. So I already was a fan of like Tarkovsky's work, so it was a no-brainer for me to check this one out. And I'm really glad that I saved it for last after watching The English Patient. It felt like a treat.
Yeah, right.
We'll get into that later.
Suffering through that, but we're just going no holds barred here. We're letting you know well in advance. But no, I'm really happy I saved this one for last. It felt good.
Yeah.
Well, so this film was incredibly difficult to find. I do not have the Criterion channel. I actually didn't see that this was available. Plus, I'm not subscribed. I have Canopy, which is through your library, and that the Google listing said watch Ivan's Childhood on Canopy, but it was restricted in my location.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I found it on YouTube, but there was no English subtitles.
Please tell me that's how you watched it.
No, I didn't. I had to, anyway. The point is, I watched the movie, and I think the track of subtitles that I found may have been incomplete, because there was a couple of times where someone would say something, and it was like, I don't know if that was enough words at the bottom for all he just said. I think it was missing some parts.
Some issues in translation.
But, yeah, well, so here's the thing. I watched it. This is, as Ian said, my first
Tarkovsky. Steven, you there? Steven? Guys? Hello? Did I lose contact with you guys all of a sudden? Hello? Sorry guys, hang on. I gotta try something here.
One of the things that I think a lot of directors are told starting out...
Sorry, Steven, I missed a whole bunch of that conversation.
Yeah.
Ever since you said, this is my first Tarkovsky, I missed the rest of that.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay.
I think
Well,
that
I
rewind.
Rewind.
So,
Go.
so because this is my first Tarkovsky, I mostly enjoyed it. It was, it's a heavy watch. It's not one that I don't know. I mean, I think as far as directorial debuts, this is what I was getting into. I think it's fantastic. I mean, a lot of directors are probably told this. I know I was told this starting out that there's certain things that you don't want to work with as a first time. If you're working on a short film or something like that, and guns, of course. I mean, in light of recent events, but also children and animals. And so Tarkovsky is able to get this really great performance out of a very young child actor. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, that's something that is kind of a feat unto itself. The cinematography is good. A lot of the dream sequences are great. I think some of the dolly shots and some of the angles that they go for in the dream sequences and all of that is, I mean, it's very impressive. This film is very well made. I didn't really connect with the story as much as I wanted to, and I felt it was maybe just a little bit claustrophobic. I mean, and it felt like that they were running out of budget, and so there's a lot of sequences just in that little bunker.
It feels
and
like they reused some footage too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very well made. I didn't hate it, but I didn't exactly like love it. I would be interested to go back and find a proper copy of this from Criterion and maybe explore some of Tarkovsky's other works, because I think there's something here. It's just it's an interesting experience.
I will say, Steven, that I think his quality films only goes up from here, and that's fair for a first viewing. I'm glad that you didn't hate it, or else I would have called it blasphemy. But
No, I didn't.
no,
I
but
didn't
like,
hate it, but it's I don't know if I was maybe in the wrong mindset or if it just.
You may have just been frustrated after trying to find a good copy to watch too.
Well, that's
yeah.
part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
like
just like, let's
if
get over with.
if you have subtitles that aren't quite matching up, or they're not fully explaining things, just little things like that can take you out of the experience, right? Where
Yeah. No, but I mean,
yeah, like
it's
I saved this for after watching The English Patient, so this just felt so refreshing in comparison.
Yeah. No, I mean it's not a terrible movie. I think it's a little rough around the edges, probably more than I think we're really giving credit for.
True.
It's a little bit, it's very heavy, and I was kind of, I do wonder at the end of all of this is like what exactly was I supposed to take away? You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think what you're supposed to.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
I think this was based on a short story, and
Yeah.
by admission of the director, it wasn't that well written, but I think he saw
Sure.
something in it, and he said, you know what, I want to try to make a feature film, and I think I see something in the story, and I want to try to figure out what it is. So I think there was an element of exploration here of him trying to find the story in this lackluster source
Oh no,
material.
and that's
I
very
yeah.
commendable. I appreciate that, but at the same time, it's and I mean spoilers, obviously, but at the very end, when it's revealed that the child was found hanged.
I think the implication is he was guillotined, actually, because there's a shot of him rolling on the floor. You can see that he's connected to his shoulders, but it shows like a room where you see a bunch of nooses, but then it also shows a guillotine, and then there's a shot of him rolling on the floor, which I think was their quick and dirty effect of him looking like his head had rolled.
Yeah, it also felt like they didn't have the budget maybe for like actually decapitating him, so that was probably just their best way of tying that together.
That, and it probably would be unethical even by Russian standards to actually decapitate the child. But no, I don't think they had money for a prosthetic either. Is what you're saying?
That's another thing I wanted to touch on. This movie is very Russian, and by that I mean it is a miserable experience. When I
Yes.
said heavy, I meant yes, it's a movie that ends with child death. So
Oh well,
Come and
it
see.
has some nice dream
if there's
sequences where
anything I love
they're in
about
heaven running on a beach.
yeah,
So.
if there's anything I love about Russians, it's their cheery optimism.
Yeah, you should see Come and See.
You have not seen Come and See.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
boy.
That
I
film
don't know that I could,
makes this movie look like a Disney film. I'm not even kidding.
boy.
And it's just, it's so intense. They used real gunfire in that movie. Like the cinematographer got shot and an actor was almost killed. If a bullet penetrated the helmet, the actor would have died. Like that's how they made Come and See with real gunfire.
Yeah. We had a whole discussion on that film last year, and we got into even a serious discussion on reckless endangerment and does it justify the end quality of the film to risk the lives of the actors? 99% of the time, absolutely fucking not. But
yeah,
I mean, it only works if you pay off and you don't actually end up killing anybody by the end, unlike the Twilight Zone movie.
oh boy, yeah, wow,
yeah, that
More on
that
that
came
later.
up. But no, this film is almost like the light-hearted Disney-fied version of Come and See in comparison.
Jesus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And back on
But,
the movie though, and something I wanted to say that I really appreciated was there's another thing you mentioned that first time filmmakers want to avoid, and that's shooting in real locations. This movie wasn't almost entirely shot out in the woods. And yet like the lighting is so good. There's like effects of light leaking into the camera, but it's very rare, and all of the clouds and shadows are just right. Like for a first-time director, it's amazing to pull something like that off, because I can tell you, in this modern day and age, it is a pain in the ass to shoot outdoors, and this guy did it in the 60s with a low budget and a miserable crew of filmmakers.
Oh yeah, and they pull off such elegant shots too, like the way the Steadicam had not been invented yet, but they do these beautiful shots where the camera almost seamlessly glides around and gets to these low angles that you wouldn't think. Like they must have some really really state of the art like crane or something at the like for its time. Like I think they did some beautiful shots that were flawless. And how do you even see the shot with like the eyepiece? I don't know. I probably need to look at how they film some of this stuff. But like this stuff is easy to pull off when you have video monitoring, but they didn't have it back then. So I'm really curious. Like and this is all just technical stuff, but I think they do such a beautiful job capturing some of these sequences where the camera kind of lingers and follows the actors around. I'm thinking of the shot in the woods with Masha and that really creepy soldier who's trying to hit on her. I don't know how old she is. I mean, it's it's a bit creepy, but
that
kind
will
of
not
beautifully
fly
shot.
today.
It's weird. It's weird. Like just the contrast there.
There's a lot of content in this that would not fly today, especially in an American movie. There's that scene. There's the child death at the end of the movie. I'm pretty sure they harm real animals at several points in the movie, which also ties into Come and See, spoiler. And but it does kind of add to the intensity and believability of the film. Like, there are very few moments where I thought, okay, I feel like I'm watching a movie, but in the few segments where it intentionally feels like I'm watching a movie is, intentional, but for the most part, it felt very believable and very intricate, and it's really hard to put into words, but I really do like this movie. I am kind of with Stephen on this one. Didn't connect with me as much, but I think I'm leaning more positive. I get what he was going for. Like, he's trying to match like the loneliness and paranoia that a child would have in a wartime setting, but I feel like it needed more of a clear vision, and the budget definitely did get run dry by the end of the movie with some of the substitutions, and there's no way they didn't reuse footage. Like, I feel like they reused the same dream footage like 3 times, and after a while it gets kind of frustrating and tedious, and I was kind of just tapping on my foot waiting for it to end, but up until that point, it is such a visceral experience.
I think the film does a good job at not overstaying its welcome. It's a nice, breezy 90 minutes, unlike The English Patient, which could have easily lost an end.
Let's save that for later. Come on.
Yeah.
He's already dead.
No,
Point
I
taken.
mean,
But no, I think I think it's a beautiful film that uses cinematography in aid of its story, and they are trying to find the story as they're making it. I think like they have a rough outline, but I think there was a lot of kind of discovery. What I really love as a motif in this is contrasting kind of the serenity and innocence of childhood and the nature, in contrast to the war around it. Like you have this sequence where there's so many explosions going off. It's very quick cut in comparison to the rest of the film, and then there's this one shot where it lingers on a cross and also like a tree, and the sun is like uh, flaring the lens behind it, and it kind of tilts facing this as sand and things are being blown up. But then it kind of lingers on that shot for a good while afterwards, just showing kind of the calm after the battle.
Mm.
And it didn't need to linger like that, but I do think that's part of the whole
Hmm.
motif of this film, and it does add a
And that's what the
certain
film's
like
about. It's just the outside, what happens after the battle occurs, and it really hammers that home in that scene in
mhm.
particular.
I also love all the shots of the water reflecting the tops of the trees and seeing all the
Mm.
flares shooting off.
That very
I
much
just
felt like
thought,
Stalker to me. Like I've seen
oh,
like montage videos of Stalker before, and you can kind of see the stepping stones for that in that movie. And I mentioned before, I
mhm.
always love
I,
first-time filmmakers where you can really see their style blossom into other
yeah,
films. It makes it more
I think
fascinating to watch.
there's definitely little things that you'd appreciate if you see this after you had seen Stalker or some of his other more
Hmm.
contemporary films. But you can tell that there's a spark here. There's a start of something here, and I'm glad that you guys are able to appreciate at least that much in this.
Hmm.
And I guarantee you, he excels with some of these ideas further on. There's
Yeah.
there's a little thing he does that where like a character kind of starts in the background and the shot is mostly static. Then they kind of exit frame and then enter in the foreground. He does that in a lot of his movies, and
Okay.
I don't know. I find that very engaging. It shows the
Mhm.
depth of the frame, and
And it
there's
also
something
adds
to that.
so much detail to the frame that you don't mind it being drawn out because so much is happening at once.
Yeah, it's like it takes its time, but it feels like it's time worth taking.
It earns
Unlike
its time, unlike
unlike the
some other
English
movies.
Patient.
Yes, we keep circling back to that, but we gotta wrap up this
well,
discussion.
should we give this a rating and move on to a
I feel like we could talk
terrible
about that
movie like
movie
The
for.
English
I
Patient?
feel like we could talk about that movie for a while. So why don't we give this movie our final thoughts? I wish I could say
Yeah,
more about it, but it is kind of a simple film in its essence. But despite that, I appreciated it a lot. I didn't connect with it as much as I wanted to, but it's incredibly well made, wonderfully acted, one of the best child performances I've seen on this channel in a while. And yeah, like I don't know what else to say beyond that. Beyond I appreciate it for what it tries to be and tries to have this very lonely perspective on the war instead of being over the top and dramatic. And like that is. Keep bringing up the English Patient. Sorry, Ivan's childhood. What did I rate it? It's tough. I would give it a 7 or a 7.5 on its own, but for the sole reason this is somehow a first-time director's project, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
I- I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I'm gonna lean more towards. I do think there's something here, and I'm definitely interested in exploring
Hmm.
more about it. But yeah, this is a little bit inaccessible in a lot of ways, and I
Quite literally.
yeah,
Ah,
definitely. So I will definitely pursue Stalker and some of the others, though. I really
Please
I
do.
liked it more than I didn't. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's fair.
okay, and that's fair for first time viewing. I think that you'll find more to appreciate after seeing his other stuff. If you like his other stuff, I highly recommend
Definitely,
Stalker.
it's
I
actually funny because David Lynch, Eraserhead. That's one of those films that it's his first feature, and I can see little traces of that film throughout all of his other works. But it's actually one of
exactly.
my least favorite Lynch films. Um,
Mm.
so I mean, the same could be said about Tarkovsky. I'm definitely curious to see more.
Yeah,
Oh
give his
yeah.
other films
Like
a try.
I put this film next to like Stanley Kubrick's Fear and Desire. I think this is actually a
Definitely.
better
This
feature
is
debut than that
nowhere
film.
near as bad as that. Yeah, I was
I
gonna
mean,
say.
I mean, and that's why Kubrick's own admission. He wanted to bury it. He didn't want anyone to see it. It's basically like an over the top Twilight Zone episode, but you can still see nuggets of his style in there, and
Definitely.
you can see how those get polished later on in his career, and really excels at. So I love seeing these first time features because you can see where some of these ideas spark, and it gives you kind of inspiration of how I can start with just a little nugget of an idea that I think might be worth exploring or filming that I think is special. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to start, and
Mhm.
I can go on from there. So I love seeing these first time features because it gives me hope. Um, yeah, I'll give this an 8 just for that reason. Like, it's not my favorite Tarkovsky film, but I love all of his stuff
Yeah, still worth
preceding
watching.
this, and I appreciate the hell out of it.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
Now let's talk about some garbage.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
I want to say before Ian, you get into this, I
Yep.
want to apologize for lowballing Puppet Master. Um,
Don't apologize
just-
for that. That's your
just-
opinion.
No, you can apologize.
No,
Thank you.
he doesn't have to. Come on.
well, no. After seeing the English Patient, I'm like, okay, but at least Puppet Master had made me laugh and knew how to have fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Puppet
You know?
Master knew what it was. The English Patient is
Let's
Wow.
let's get into it. So,
okay.
The English Patient is a film won over Fargo. I just want to let that sink in before getting into it.
I
But
have thoughts on this
Despite
too.
that, I wanted to give it a chance. I was really hoping it would be a Departed situation or Gladiator situation where everybody only hated it at first because it won over another film they thought deserved Best Picture more, but when they look back on it, they're like, hey, The Departed's really good. Gladiator's really good and holds up well on its own. This is not one of those movies, but I wanted to give it a chance anyways. Ralph Fiennes is one of my favorite actors of all time, and the editor is Walter Murch, who edited a film called, it's not a big deal, it's just Apocalypse Now. It's only one of the best edited films
you know
ever
what?
made.
That's like the one credit worth noting that I think is respectable. Walter Murch having to deal with editing this film.
Yeah,
I
there's some clever, transitions here and there, but it's, yeah. But so what's the film about? It's, at the close of World War II, and it's mostly about a young nurse tending to a badly burned flash crane victim played by Ralph Fiennes, and it also kind of cuts back and forth between his flashbacks, growing, kind of spending his time in Cairo, Egypt, and falling in love in the very rudimentary and dumb love affair. But a lot of people accuse this film of being boring and uneventful, but I actually kind of respect it for that on those grounds alone, because it's kind of refreshing to have like this big budget Hollywood war movie that's kind of at least trying to be more about like a character's experience, a character falling in love, and not really about like over the top battle scenes or ridiculous events. So I don't really agree with those criticisms. However, no, hold on. However, no.
Okay.
My problem is that the drama it has is so petty and stupid and one-dimensional. It's not the fact that it's so dramatic and slow that bothers me. It's that the drama just isn't worth the experience. And I feel like I learned nothing about the characters or experienced any emotions by the end of it, despite how hard it wanted me to feel. Sorry, go on, Steven.
Okay, now that you're done,
I will say just one very positive thing before you go off, Steven, because I know it's going to be good. One major gripe that I have with films is when the title doesn't deliver on what I would expect it to deliver. And I have to give this film credit because it does really test your patience. So I applaud it for pulling through with my expectations.
This is like what we talked about with Brawl in Cell Block 99. It's like right there on the 10. He's going to have a brawl in Cell Block 99.
Exactly.
Okay.
People speak English, and I did have to, and it did test my patience. So
I knew what you were doing, and I was ready for it.
Let's talk about 1996 as a year in film.
We were all 1 year old.
I was 1 year old. So I'm gonna read the names of some films: Fargo, The People versus Larry Flint, Sling Blade, Scream, Primal Fear,
Scream,
David Cronenberg's Crash.
Oh, and
These are
Secret and
all-
Lies. This one over Secret and Lies too.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about Oscar award-winning The English Patient. This film is a fucking disaster.
Yeah,
There's no
kind of
way
is.
to even where to even begin.
Well, funnily enough, I played a little game called The Last of Us 2, and I had my issues with that game, and this, it's not the same story at all, but it reminded me of a lot of the same problems I have with that story, where there's a lot of good ideas, but it just doesn't know how to use any of those ideas in a meaningful way.
There's
so
interesting
fucking
moments.
exhausting.
There's some interesting moments, but I just can't give a shit about anything. I could not care about anything.
What
I don't
was
know,
Ray Fiennes' character arc?
It's so
What did he
so
learn?
middle of the road of competently made, but not accelerating at any of it, or it's not even entertainingly bad.
Yeah.
I just couldn't give a shit about anything happening.
Yeah, and it's so fundamentally flawed on a writing level. This movie is the epitome of this happens 'cause drama. This happens 'cause, the character needs to feel this way about a character. Like the car crash. That happens in the middle of the movie. Spoiler alert if you somehow haven't seen this shitty movie. But there's a car crash that just happens out of nowhere, and the only reason that car crash happens is so Ray Fiennes and the hot girl stay behind and fall in love with each other and have increased their affair love plot while her husband goes away. Like, there's no other way.
That was literally the only interesting thing to happen in the movie is sudden violence. And why wasn't there more of that? This does make me wonder, are we just desensitized to like types of movies, or is there some generational divide where because this didn't happen to us that we can't connect with it? But then I watched something like Come and See Your Average Childhood and I'm like, no, it's just a poorly made movie.
Exactly.
No, and so, I mean, let's get into this. Why were they having an affair in the first place? I mean, seriously.
Because they love each other.
Because war made horny.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, that's fine and all, but I mean, seriously, I'm not even being a dick right now. What I'm saying is, like, they don't... Who is the guy who plays her husband?
Colin Firth.
Colin Firth. Okay, he's not really an asshole.
That's one thing I kind of liked about it, though.
But he becomes an asshole after he finds out his wife has been
cheating. And he tries to run him over with a fucking plane.
Yeah, I mean...
Hey, buddy, you have a gun. Why don't you pull out your gun and shoot him? I felt like I was Seth Green and Austin Powers. It's like, I have a gun in my room. Give me 5 seconds, I'll go grab it. Bang.
No,
that's all you had to do.
There's no I mean, I honestly would have... I mean, as much as I dislike cliches like this, I would have at least maybe tried to connect with it more if there was like a justification, like, oh, he's abusive, or he does this, or
I actually
she's trying to
kind of like that he's a normal guy, because it does make...
Why?
I hate that. Well, listen, I hate
She's
that trope of the
husband. He treats her fine. She's fine. She's living in a fucking... What is wrong with this woman?
Oh, I know.
What is the deal?
I'm conflicted because I agree with you. What's the deal with airline food? Speaking of Seinfeld, I agree with you, but I also hate the trope of like the asshole that we're not supposed to like so much.
What I'm saying is, at least the trope would give something. Like, there's
that's true.
Justification
also,
for
Kristen,
I'm watching over 2.5 hours of like white people problems, like first world bullshit. You don't like your husband, go cry in some money.
Oh, I know. I mean, here's the thing: like Kristen Scott Thomas's character, I'm not even gonna say her name because she has no character. What is her character? She's just there to be fucked, basically. She's just there to be a love triangle. Like, she paints. Yeah. Wow, great. What a character. I know so much about her because she paints. You know who else paints? Bob Ross. You know what else about Bob Ross? He has a character. I could watch his videos and be like, this guy has a personality. This guy has a character arc.
I'd rather watch 4 episodes of Bob Ross in a row than this again.
I watched a whole season of Bob Ross over this again.
Oh, yeah.
And
I might learn something from it too. I might learn how to fucking paint. No, this is...
Look, Here's another thing. Here's another thing that really
No amount of fluffy little clouds can fix this movie.
I know.
Here's another thing that grinds my gears. Willem Dafoe shows up, and his character is he had both of his thumbs cut off.
Also, he's Canadian. Okay. I have a gripe about when Canada is not well. There's nothing indicating that this is Montreal or that he's French Canadian. Maybe he was. Oh, and his code name is Moose. Like, the most cliche, stereotypical fucking. It's like I don't think they filmed in Canada. If they did, I didn't recognize it. But like,
I popped my mic so many times, but I don't care. It's worth it.
His name is Moose. That's fucking great.
Also, Willem Dafoe's character is so out of place tonally because Willem Dafoe didn't get the memo that this was a serious movie, so he just acted like his normal crazy psychotic self, and it's so over the top when the other characters are trying to take the story so seriously. Like, it felt so off.
I mean, he's literally working with this one girl and a fucking burn victim in a bed. He has to act it up somehow to make it interesting.
Also, she just lets him in. She just lets the stranger in with a burn victim, and she hears that he had a problem with him in the past and that he wants to kill him, and she doesn't do anything about it. Why?
And then question that he's shooting up his morphine or something.
Yeah,
like
he's straight up mentions that. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So here's the other thing, and I mean, we could talk about a lot about this movie all day long, but when it relates to Willem Dafoe, I mean, you're saying he's out of place tonally, but I'm saying he doesn't even fit into the story.
No, he doesn't. His plot goes nowhere. His plot.
This film entirely, you wouldn't even notice.
That's what I'm saying. Where this film had a lot of great ideas, where this character was affected by the burn victim in the past, and the burn victim had a shady past, and like that's on paper, that sounds like a fantastic idea for some compelling drama. Sure. But they don't go anywhere with that. Like, Willem Dafoe knows what he did. The burn victim admitted what he did, and he's like, nah, I'm gonna leave you here. I'm not gonna do anything. See ya. And he just leaves the story forever. It's like, okay, you had a nugget of a great idea for drama, and you just spilled it all over the place.
So I think this is based off of a book, right? Like, was it or?
It was based off of a book. I really hope this is nothing like the book. I really hope this is nothing like.
When Willem Dafoe walked away after all of that, like you could have played some sentimental music from like Twin Peaks, and then maybe this would be good. Like if it was
like Showgirls.
Yeah, exactly right. But this film isn't even ironic enough. It's not even self-aware enough.
And then it tries to be funny at times. Like that's so totally all over the place. Where we'll go from serious scenes of Juliette Binoche's friends that we didn't know or care about go off and explode on a landmine, and like 5 minutes later, they're like Ralph Fiennes is making like stereotype jokes with this Indian guy. Like, what is happening?
Weren't they dancing in the muddy rain at one point? Like, and that was immediately after. Like, it's
and like the first time Juliette Binoche is going through like all the soldiers, and they're like, "Yeah, baby, give me a kiss." It's so goofy and ridiculous. Like, it doesn't feel right.
It's so all over
and
the
I'm
place.
all for implementing some humor into a dramatic story, but there's a way to do it right, and there's a way to do it wrong, and this movie does it very wrong.
So I was just looking at the. Sorry, go ahead, Steven. So I was just looking at the director, Anthony Minghella, I think, and it looks like he's also behind The Talented Mr. Ripley and Cold Mountain. I remember, I think I liked The Cold Mountain. Yeah, like those are decent movies, and he made them since making this, so he's approved, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, who would you have direct this movie instead to make it interesting?
I would just say get a better script. I think you could direct this movie as well as you want, but you know what? Now that you mention it, that too, like the look of this movie, like it looks nice, but it looks off. Like it looks too studio made. Like you could practically see like the studio lighting, and there's something.
Bland.
Yeah, it's so bland. Like there's no life or energy to it. It's not like artistic enough to be interesting on an artsy level, but it's not realistic or gritty enough to feel realistic.
It's competently made enough to be a movie, but it's not good or interesting or bad enough to be anything interesting.
Exactly, it's competent to a fault.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It's like right down the middle, and I just
It's so painfully down the middle.
That's funny because I was going to bring this up too. There's a shot at the end where the plane is flying overhead, and he's. I think he has Kristen Scott Thomas's body in the plane at this point, and he's trying to get them to safety. Ralph Fiennes.
Rafe Fiennes.
I kept.
Rafe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anyway. My point is, there's that moment where they show that shot, and it almost. It didn't look like a plane flying, at all.
It was apparently 100% practical, though. It was real, but it doesn't really feel like it. It feels off. It is a real shot, though, and they made a big deal about that in the special features.
I know, but it looks like, to me, it reminded me, and maybe this is a problem with the cinematography, just how flat it is, but it reminded me of the same kind of thing that Cronenberg was kind of parodying in Existenz, where they're driving in the car and it's like the Hitchcock background.
Oh, yeah, that kind of technique. But no, apparently that was real. But the way it's shot is so weird. Like, the lighting must have been off or something along those lines. But I agree. And
I think it's a very competently
it's very well edited. I'll give it that. Walter Murphy did his best with the transitions and stuff like that. There's a sound transition where it's this low rumbling that goes into playing of the drums, and it transitions to a party scene. It's that's clever. That's very clever edit and transition.
I have to give Walter Murphy because he was the editor. He's a legendary editor in Hollywood. He cut his teeth on Apocalypse Now. He's basically learned every single editing system that's come out from the old film reel days to the digital stuff, and he's worked on each system until he won an award. So I got to commend him for that. Also, just for sitting through all the dailies and raw footage of this, because I can't imagine if the end result is this bland. I can't imagine sitting through every single take of each shot that they had to do.
I gotta make this work somehow.
So I give him props for that and putting it together.
Here's something to think about. For being a romance movie, this film is it's almost as clinical as Eyes Wide Shut, but not in an artistic intended way.
I wouldn't even say that's clinical.
No, it's just what I'm saying is the scenes of
the sex scenes, the nudity, but this is that whole movie. It's so there's no the actors try their best, but there's just no charisma to it.
But what I'm saying is, when you're trying to film a steamy romance, it's almost like there's no chemistry. There's no, there's nothing.
It feels like the actors just don't like being around each other, and I think they do their best. Ralph Fiennes in particular, I think, tries really hard with the material he's given, but he just has nothing to work with. But I know this was a weird issue with direction. Every now and again, Juliette Binoche, she's a fantastic actress. We talked about her before in Three Colors Blue, and she's amazing in that. But in this movie,
she's my God.
And there's scenes in this where her crying is so unconvincing. It's basically boo hoo hoo, just out of nowhere, and it's not handled in a subtle way, and that feels like an issue of direction, because I've seen her act well before, but it feels like the director's just going no, I don't think the audience knows this is a sad scene. We gotta make it a little more obvious. And there's just several moments like that where the actors just have to cry out of nowhere with these unconvincing crocodile tears when they're more than capable of pulling otherwise.
I thought the only romantic scene was when she was going on that pulley with Kip or whatever that Indian guy's name was, and he was showing her the paintings with the flares.
Yeah.
That was a neat scene.
That was a neat scene, but let's talk about the scene beforehand, where there's a trail of candle-lit snails leading into a sexy little cavern where they make love. This movie is
Yeah.
so by the numbers, and I was so done
This
with that
is
scene.
like
I
if
literally
you
got
took
up from my couch,
three-
and my mom forced me to sit down again. Kind of
Oh
done with
God.
this movie.
This is like jamming 3 bargain bin romance novels together and trying to just piece something
Justified.
together.
Or they should have just picked one vision and just made it interesting.
Well,
But
this film doesn't have a single vision. This is like, I mean, this is a disaster. This is barely.
I think it wanted to have a vision, but again,
Why-
the execution
okay.
is so sloppy.
So serious question. Why did this win the Academy Award for Best? Was it film?
Harvey
what did it win?
Weinstein.
But okay, there it is.
Mm.
Yeah. If I can say one thing to this film,
And by the way, just sorry, real quick, that is not why we dislike this movie. Pulp Fiction is one of the best films ever made, and it's produced by Harvey Weinstein. This film sucks.
no,
Sorry,
no,
go on.
I'm just. Yeah, no, I mean, he also made Shakespeare in Love, which beat Saving Private Ryan and The Thin Red Line. I
Yeah.
didn't even like Thin Red Line. Dear God, I mean, Shakespeare in Love, really?
No
No,
comment.
So you would take Thin Red Line over those movies?
Oh yeah, definitely. Back to this film. If I can say anything to this film's credit, and it's not even in credit to the film, but it is at least interesting to see Kristen Scott Thomas go from this to Only God Forgives, which I loved, but is an incredibly different film.
That is
Um,
interesting.
Yeah, it is. That's
So-
kind of neat, I guess.
Yeah, there is something. So I was trying to look at just like a review of the book and the source material, just to was missing in translation here. I didn't get too far into the research because we had to hop into the podcast, and I literally did it like 5 minutes beforehand. But they all have secret identities at some point that they just aren't good at keeping up. It's like they're lying to themselves to try to get by and to be under assumed identity. So maybe there's some theme there. I mean,
Yeah, like, does it want to be an anti-war film? Does it want to be a romance? Like, it kind of teases the anti-war idea where the only scene that kind of worked for me emotionally, at least a little bit, was when Ray Fiennes was talking to, he has a very German name, and he was talking to the guy to try and get help for Kristen Scott Thomas, who was wounded in the desert. And his name sounds German, and he doesn't have his papers, and because of that, they assume he's a German soldier, and they, knock him out and take him on a train and imprison him, and that was interesting. That was like an interesting idea, and it was somewhat effective emotionally, at least compared to everything else. But again, they don't go anywhere.
So like goofy and over the top, and it's like by the time you get to that point, I'm so disinterested overall. It's like I just didn't even.
But again, in a different movie, I think it would work better. Maybe in something like Ivan's Childhood or something along those lines. And Ray Fiennes, again, does a good job. I can't stress enough how bad I feel for him in this movie. And there's he was, I saw him do like an interview on like all of the films he's been in over the years, and he did not look very passionate when he was talking about the English Patient. You can tell he was just like, yeah, it was a great experience. It was awesome.
If you saw him in Schindler's List, he was probably definitely a lot more passionate about that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because he had something to work with.
Yeah, and a script, and a good script.
I mean, if he's more passionate about, In Bruges than this, I mean...
He's more passionate about Harry Potter than this.
An inanimate fucking object.
I was going to say that line first.
I'm sorry I called you I'm sorry I called you an inanimate fucking object. I was upset.
Yeah, it's just... I don't know. This is... It's almost it does lean into almost like Twin Peaks, Tommy Wiseau parody level.
I feel like that's giving it too much credit.
I also because the thing is about those films, and I mean with the exception of Tommy Wiseau maybe, I think those kinds of things where they're directly parodying that soap opera sort of sentimentality. It's like they're self-aware about it. This film is not self-aware at all. It's playing it so straight.
Yeah. I feel like there was an era like in the 90s with these dramas that were all Oscar bait, like the Pelican Brief and this and other ones where It's just overly sentimental and kind of self-serious.
Life is
But
beautiful.
but it also
Yeah.
doesn't want to engage too far into the heavy stuff. They just want to imply it lightly, and ultimately it's like how do we reflect on the war but not feel terrible at the end?
Life is Beautiful. Jacob the Liar is another one that's like
Yeah,
holy
they
shit.
all tried to go for like that schmaltzy Oscar Beatty war vibe to it.
Yeah,
and they just feel kind of generic.
I think we've learned from these other films, war is not pretty. War is not nostalgic. It was a brutal fucking time, and that needs to be reflected in the films so that we learn not to repeat that shit. Because and we also don't want to be disconnected from previous generations who have experienced it. So you see films like Gavin's Childhood or Come and See or these other film or Schindler's List. I mean that
definitely. Yeah.
I mean, those films really give you a sense vicariously what it must have been like to experience that and be there. And I feel like that visceral impact is needed to really take these things seriously.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys a question, and I need a serious answer as much as possible. What was Ray Fiennes' character arc? What did he learn in the movie, and how did he grow as a character? I genuinely want you to answer that.
See, that's
exactly.
Yeah.
No.
What is Kristen Scott Thomas's arc?
To
What
be
is
fucked.
Willem Dafoe's arc?
To be crazy.
This calls the question: do characters need an arc? Some films they don't change, but they also have other interesting stuff.
Even those characters at least do like not really a change, but more so like there and back again. Like there's some kind of journey we got out of it at the very least. And here, I feel like I learned nothing about these characters, and that's the most disappointing aspect of it all.
It's like
at the very least,
they don't have to change if I learn something from it, and there's something about the journey they went on, even though if they didn't change at the end, that there's something to learn about life from it, like
exactly.
The Master, or I don't know if you've seen The Master, but like those characters don't necessarily change, but there's
the Big Lebowski,
they still go on a journey, and there's still something interesting there.
Uncut Gems, there's one.
Uncut Gems,
yeah.
Well,
I loved The Master. I loved, loved the Big Lebowski. Another film that, God, I mean, Goodfellas is kind of bordering on that.
I'd argue there's an arc he kind of goes
really
through.
Learn a lot by the end.
Well, it's not so much he learns by the end, but it's just so disheartening by the end. But anyways,
either the character learns and grow, or we learn and grow watching them.
See, that's how boring this movie is. We're talking about other movies when talking about it.
Yeah, and see, that's one thing that I've brought up on the podcast before, I think, on the Psycho Killer episode where we were discussing Manhunter and Golden Glove and some of those. It's like those films, it's like characters don't have to be likable, but they have to be interesting.
Exactly.
And I didn't think any single one of these characters were all that interesting.
Because they have nothing to offer. Like, what was the point of Julie Binoche and the Indian guys? I don't want to say Indian guy, but that's basically all he is. And he, sweeps minds. This may be a little in poor taste, but I was really hoping that guy would blow up and Ray Fiennes would blow up at the end of the movie, and she'd be like, "No, everybody I love blows up by the end."
God, I mean that would have been interesting at the very least, as often distasteful as that is. But it would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, Willem Dafoe is interesting just because he's Willem Dafoe. Never mind what character he's playing.
He's a crazy drug addict, so he plays himself.
Yeah, no, that's.
I'm something of a I'm something of a doctor myself.
Yeah, as far as Willem Dafoe films go, I just want to apologize to Dog Eat Dog.
No, that film's still worse.
No, I'm
that
sorry,
film's still worse. I don't know if I agree with that.
At least that film was interesting in how incomprehensibly bad shit it was.
Yeah, this film was interesting on like an annoying studio level. I think the cast does carry it at least somewhat for me.
It just makes you wonder, what is the Academy awarding here? What are they awarding here?
They're awarding Harvey Weinstein's bank account.
Yeah, they're awarding the expensive producers that helped get this film made. Fargo won everything else. I'm pretty sure Fargo won so much other stuff.
as fun as it is to shit
Wait,
on this
actually,
movie,
hang
I
on.
feel like I'm missing something. I feel like there's something at the root of this, that there was the reason this was given money and it was made, that there's a reason for it, and I want to know what it is, because it's irritating the shit
I
out of me that I don't know.
sorry guys, I do apologize. I was misinformed. Fargo won no Oscars.
Wow.
Wait,
What?
actually, no. Wait, no. Yeah, Frances McDormand won Best Actress. No, it
Frances
did.
McDormand. Yeah, she won Best
I
Actress.
think it won Best Screenplay as well, if I'm not mistaken. And that's it.
I mean,
that's
honestly,
all it won.
I'm curious, what was the best supporting actor?
I imagine that's probably. I have to find it, but it's got to be William H Macy. Like that's probably my bet. It's William H Macy.
Is anyone else feeling compelled to look at the trivia section just to try to pull something out of this
Yeah,
movie?
yeah.
It feels like there should be a rabbit in the hat, but I just find like.
But yeah, what was the point of Julie Binoche and her relationship with the Minesweeper? What was the point of that?
Yeah.
Nothing. Like it's just nothing. It's just more petty drama. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just
in 2005, Julia Binoche had her Oscar touched up by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Her 3-year-old son was fond of playing with it and had subsequently become tarnished by peeling. One of the perks of being an Oscar winner is that you can have your Oscar repaired free by the Academy. Wow, isn't that interesting? The Germans who shoot the Almasy plane at the beginning were actually tourists roped into production because they couldn't afford any more extras.
What?
Incredible.
What was
Ralph
the budget
Fiennes'
of this
burn
movie?
makeup took 5 hours to apply every day. Fiennes insisted that a full body makeup be applied even for the scenes where only makeup would be filmed.
The makeup looks terrible. That's what I was thinking every time. Sorry, go on.
Knew she wanted to be in the movie the minute she read the scene where Kip Sang shows Hannah the fresco paintings on the wall of the church. I mean, hey, that's the one scene I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that's all.
The burn makeup is terrible. Like I've kept thinking that every time it zoomed into that. I'm like, The Thing from 1982 has better makeup effects than this.
Oh, 100%.
No Oscars for that movie though. 2 Razzies though.
Oh, this is funny. Writer and director Anthony Mangala's first cut of the movie was 4 hours and 10 minutes long.
Oh my god.
You know, I believe it. I believe it because it feels like nothing happened in this 2.5-hour cut.
Here's the thing: when you, I don't know if this is his first film, but you know, when you're really precious about something, it can be really hard to trim down and lose whatever's there. And that's why you need a guy like Walt Rush to tell you what's shit and what isn't, or what's less shit given what you have. You know.
I wanted to Google this. 1996 Best Supporting Actor was Cuba Gooding Jr. for Jerry Maguire.
Wow.
Over William H. Macy? No.
I mean, personally, I would have gone with Edward Norton and Primal Fear, but
that's a good one too.
I think Ian is right that this film is so horrendously dull and empty that we're having to resort to talking.
You know what? Why don't we wrap it up? I feel like I'm done talking about this movie.
I hope I never see it again.
Really wanted to like this film.
This is my second time watching it, and I thought when I first saw it, I think it was on like TCM. I'm like, that's interesting. And then I see it again. I'm like, why did I think this was interesting?
You were younger, probably.
Actually, speaking of TCM, I forgot this. Going back to Ivan's childhood, apparently in 2009, the first 10 minutes of it accidentally showed on Cartoon Network because they accidentally switched the signal to TCM. That's interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Not really. Ratings.
I wanted to love this film. I was really hoping this was a Departed situation where people were just too harsh on it because it won Best Picture over something else. But now I realize they were completely justified. It's got a good cast. It looks nice. It's very well edited. But that's about it for fans. I'm really struggling to find anything else to compliment the film for, but I can't. I really can't. It's not the fact that it's slow that's the problem. It's the fact that it doesn't earn any of the emotions that's going for as the core issue with the movie. And I had it out of 5. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. This is a 4 out of 10. And yes, I did rate it lower than Jurassic Park 3. You're welcome.
Wow. Yeah. So I always have a hard time giving certain war films a low rating because I do think the war. Well, actually no, I really have standards for what a good war film should represent, and in cases where it isn't in battle, like how did it affect people around it? And I do think that's interesting subject matter, and I wish this film could have done that better and show like the after effects of war. I feel like this is like the aftermath of a much more interesting movie that we didn't see, which could be a cool concept in and of itself. But they really did the one thing you don't want to do, and that's bore your audience or not give them a reason to care. I really struggled with this. It took me like 4 times to just finish watching the damn thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this made me apologize to the fucking puppet master Littlest Rex. So I'm giving this a 2.
Holy
Because
shit.
that's how many brain cells I had left by the end of that. It's like I found the last 2 fucks and I'm hanging on to them that I have to give.
All right, Steven.
I'm saving him.
Finish us off.
Closing thoughts. I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Hey, that was too much emotion. Do it again.
This movie is a fucking disaster.
Sorry, there
Please
was too much
don't
emotion
watch
in that
it
monologue.
again. Yeah, right. 1.5 out of 10.
I wanted to like this movie, man. I really
I'm
did.
saving the last 2. Yeah, I'm saving the last 2 fucks I have to give to our next movie.
Oh, yeah, good segue.
Also, I mean, I think it's only apropos that possibly one of the most exhaustingly dull films we've talked about, it dragged this discussion out to Saturdays with Moire.
Yes.
That's how bad it was.
This was actually recorded on a Saturday. By the time you listen to this on Spotify, whenever Ian uploads again, it may
Give
be
you a
Tuesday.
middle finger.
I don't know. In the time that it takes you to watch this piece of shit, it'll be Tuesday. Moving on.
There's much better lawn movies out there. Let's just leave it at that.
Oh my god.
Segue into a good movie, The Messenger.
Oh yeah,
Steven.
I gotta introduce this.
Spoilers.
The Messenger. 2009 is a war drama starring Ben Foster, Woody Harrelson, Steve Buscemi, and Jenna Malone. It is the directorial debut of Oren Moverman, who also wrote the screenplay with Alessandro. Come on, what is this story about? Well, it's about Will Montgomery, as played by Ben Foster, who we all know from Hell or High Water, is the Comanche baby brother.
Comanche.
Yeah, who stars with Woody Harrelson as a recently placed on leave U.S. Army Staff Sergeant who finds that his girlfriend is engaged to another man. He is stationed, and before he is to be dispatched or discharged, he is dispatched as a casualty notification officer alongside Gulf War veteran Woody Harrelson. So they go door to door and they tell people that they have family that has been lost in the war. It's a very independent film. It's another one that I think you can feel the budget, you can feel the sort of indie roots and cutting corners and things of that nature. But it's also very well made, and it's an interesting little character study and a look at a job that I really didn't know that much about. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It made me appreciate their work a lot more than I did before.
This film was such a refreshing look into this part of, a military service person's life, because normally this is usually like a little tidbit in a larger movie where you see the 2 soldiers coming home, and then and the mother already knows why they're there, and so she starts breaking down and crying on her front porch, like you see in Saving Private Ryan, and that's usually it. You don't see how the whole thing unfolds. But to actually follow these 2 characters around who have to break the news that their loved ones were killed in action and died, it is such a fascinating and heartbreaking look into this world. And what I love about the way this is done, and this is an indie budget film, and it's also interesting. This is like the second directorial debut feature that we're talking about here from this person. Um, like the other one was Ivan's childhood being,
Hmm.
yeah, that Andrei Tarkovsky's first film, and this is this guy's first film. I love that every time that they encounter the families, they all have very different emotional reactions, but also they shoot it handheld and in one unbroken take for the most part. And it really makes those scenes feel raw. It really has a true cinema verite feel to it. And the way that they just saved it for those moments to have the camera be handheld and to capture it all in one take just really puts you in that scene and really maximizes like the impact of it without being like too flashy with the camera. It's just they're capturing the action as best they can. You can see kind of the sensibilities of the camera operator as he's trying to follow the actors around, giving this emotional moment. And I also like the fact that each family, they all get emotional, but they all get emotional in different ways. And you can see how difficult it is to do like one or two of these in a day or however often they were called in to do it, and what their lives are like, at the end of like their terms. And this is kind of like the bitter end of your service, I suppose, of having to break this news. And it
Hmm.
was so fascinating. Like this is such a overlooked movie because I never heard about it before this, but it's really, yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I recommended this movie because that's certainly a division that doesn't get enough credit that it deserves. The very uncomfortable process of having to go to grieving families and tell them the news in person. It's a very thankless job, and I'm really glad this movie explored that in an interesting way. I think in terms of like the first act of the movie, if it was just that first act, it would be one of the greatest short films ever made. Like it's very stressful, intense. There's really interesting chemistry with Ben Foster and Woody Harrelson. And it's like, well, why don't we just go around and ask for directions? No, we don't ask for directions. Real men don't ask for directions. He has like this kind of obsession of keeping this good personality and this kind of masculinity, while Ben Foster is very new to this kind of process, and he's trying to take shortcuts and trying to avoid grieving as much as possible, where Woody Harrelson kind of forces him to kind of embrace that as much as he can and kind of realize the consequences that came with war. And it's a very interesting look in that regard. I think when it gets into the love affair subplot towards the end, I kind of lost interest a little bit, admittedly. It doesn't quite keep its magic throughout, and I do wish it kind of focused more on the messaging process than it did. But and still really enjoyed the film overall, and especially for a directorial debut. It's very emotionally visceral, very interesting character study, and just the I could watch these two actors just act off each other for a full movie. If it was just them talking in a room, having some coffee with nothing else going on for 90 minutes, I'd watch that movie.
Yeah, no, I mean it's very much a character study,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is something that actually the English Patient, keep going back to this, that the English Patient did not do well. That I think this film does is there's not really a plot so much here. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it is more about a study of these characters, but they are so interesting and so entertaining to watch
Mm-hmm.
that it makes up for the moments where the narrative is a little thin because you're so engaged um, in the characters, and a lot of that, I mean, it is the writing, it is the the performances. I mean, it's always cool when actors help out, first time directors and kind of give them a leg up. I know Tarantino did that with Harvey Keitel and people who were there and just willing to take a chance on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think that that's cool. And for Woody Harrelson to be in something like this, which is fairly low budget,
Mm-hmm. Very
you know,
emotionally stressful.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, you're putting your yourself on the line here for someone, and you hope that it works out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was really well done. I think that it admittedly could have gone a little bit further with the idea. Just really,
Agreed.
yeah. I think that there was more to expand on and look at. I agree the romance towards the end was it felt a little bit out of place as far as the
It
greater.
felt like it had to make it more dramatically interesting and it didn't need to.
Yeah.
But I will admit, even that love affair subplot was more interesting than the love affair and the English patient, because I actually understood why the characters fell in love with each other, and why the wife was so emotionally vulnerable and open to being in an affair in the first place.
Yeah.
I want to mention just one trivia thing that I read that I thought was fascinating, and this goes back to the real emotional moments being shot in one take. The scene where Will and Olivia speak to each other in like the kitchen near the end of the movie is 8 minutes long, and it's unbroken. It's all on a tripod. There's like a little bit of a zoom lens to kind of zoom in, but they improvised most of that. And
yeah, a lot of dialogue was improvised apparently.
I thought they did an excellent job with those scenes, just kind of letting the emotions play out and the actors feel in the moment. And it really shows when you put a lot of faith in your actors to deliver on something, when they have a good sense of their characters, how magical moments like that can happen. And I think that can make or break your indie film if you do that. But if you really put trust in them, you can get some great results.
So it is
Absolutely.
worth noting that Woody Harrelson was actually nominated for an Oscar for this film.
I think Ben Foster was too, wasn't he?
Ben Foster? No, I don't think so.
Oh, he definitely should have been.
Well, Woody Harrelson did lose to Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, which I kind of have to agree there. But I mean, yeah, this is a fantastic film. The cinematography is really good. The dialogue is funny. It's very witty and it's very heartfelt.
And
yeah, I mean,
implements humor, at just the right moments, and it feels completely natural.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, it was a pleasant surprise.
Good.
Because after the English Patient,
anything seems better after that movie.
no, after the English Patient, because it's funny to mention the English Patient and the Messenger. Yeah, the Messenger. They have about the same runtime, but it took me like
Messenger feels so much more brisk.
It does, yeah, because it took me like 3 times to get through the English Patient, and I watched The Messenger all in one, just like, wow, this is great. I want to see what's going on here. I want to, know what's going to happen.
You always feel like there's something beneath the surface with the characters, and that's always a sign of great writing to me, where it's like, on the surface it's great, but behind the surface you just know there's a little more in there you want to uncover. Like there's some of the best RPGs or games I've ever played have that vibe to the characters and the companions. Like, it's why we love characters like Garrus that are so mysterious behind the surface, and you just want to learn more about them. It's the same thing for movies.
Garrus?
Have you not played Mass Effect?
Oh, God. No. I played a little bit of the first one.
Do you remember the Turian guy, the guy with, like, the sniper?
The weird funny head, yeah.
Yeah, the funny head, but he's arguably the best character in that. But, it's the same thing there, where there's writing where you just know there's more about the character beneath the surface, but you're not learning so much about him that all of the mystery is ruined. That's a sign where you absolutely nailed your character writing to me.
Yeah, definitely.
And Ben Foster should have been nominated for he should have won several Oscars by now. Was he nominated for Hell or High Water? I don't think he was.
God, he should have been. Hell or High Water was like,
he absolutely carried that movie. But Chris Pine was good in that too, and he's not good in anything else. So
I don't know about that one. I mean, he was in Unstoppable with Denzel Washington, which is a fantastic film. No, I'm not even being ironic. That's a good ass movie.
All right.
But as far as Ben Foster, I mean, he's been in some stuff. I mean, it's funny because he's one of those guys. He's been in stuff like this.
He always gives it 110%, no matter what movie he's in. He's in Free Ten to Yuma, and he's a fantastic villain in that.
Yeah, he's been in Hell or High Water, and I mean, he was also in stuff like
Leave No Trace.
The Mechanic. Yeah.
Wait, The Mechanic with Jason Statham?
Yeah, exactly. So it's but he's actually pretty good in that too.
Yeah, he tries his best. He's
Yeah,
always that
so
kind of actor. Like, he really blends into his characters.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, this was pretty good. I really liked Steve Buscemi's character. I thought it was neat how he came back at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He did a
Oh,
great job, but Steve Buscemi has been memed so much at this point that I couldn't help but
oh,
chuckle a little bit the first time I saw
Mm.
him, but I got used
yeah,
to it very
well,
But
quickly.
you know what? I really liked his first performance too, and it shows how, again, people take these things emotionally very differently, and he starts blaming them, like, how come you're not out there? And,
Mm,
people just kind of lash out in ways that aren't exactly fair, but they have to, they're
yeah.
professionals, and they have to kind of take
You
it,
you
or
need someone to blame, because if
they,
you
they, they,
blame
they they
yourself,
have
that's
to
too
deliver the
much.
information. But, like, how else would you take that kind of news? And it shows how everyone takes that news, like, a little bit differently, but it is always very emotional, and that's a very difficult thing to deal with, but also, like, perform as well. And I think he did a fantastic job. And I like that there was a bit of a redemption arc where he, comes up to him later, and it shows how, you could tell that he was feeling that way in the moment, but he realizes that maybe he was being unfair, lashing out at them. But
Hmm.
when they're just there to deliver the news. So I really like how that wrapped up, and I like how he came back into it, just for a brief
I think
moment.
it's also sort of funny to mention that two actresses from the latter two films, both Jenna Malone and Kristen Scott Thomas, would go on to star in Nicholas Winding Refn films.
All
Jenna
right.
Malone, Jenna Malone was actually in The Neon Demon, which is a
That's
pretty.
right. Yeah.
It's kind of a fun movie.
It's a interesting movie, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
very interesting. So I don't know. I just needed a minute to talk about.
You need more time to jerk off Nicholas Winding Refn. I
Yeah,
get it.
exactly. Literally me in Drive.
Yeah, literally me. Back to this movie real quick. I'd say
Yeah,
my major issue with it is the cinematography is like impressive from an acting level, and how the actors can give these long monologues and keep up this performance for such a long period of time. I think it's very flat and boring from a visual perspective. I know it had a low budget, but I've
yeah.
seen low budget filmmakers do more with that money. Like, it's my
I
biggest
mean,
issue is that, like, I feel like I could have watched a play with the same characters and the same dialogue and get just as much out of watching it. I didn't really it didn't really justify, the cinematic experience for me. And I don't know how petty that sounds, because it is very much a movie focused on drama, but I think it is worth pointing out, and something I've heard mentioned before, that it's like what people say about video games, is that it's like, if I'm not playing the video game, I might as well just be watching a movie. It's like, well, if I'm not getting a cinematic vibe from the movie, I might as well be watching a play.
well, it's a limited budget they're working with, and I
That's
thought
true.
they did more with the cinematography here than they did in The English Patient. I
I,
mean,
I mean, yeah, like, there's more
Yeah,
going on.
and also I
uh,
like that they did those cinema verite handheld long takes for whenever they broke the news to people to
Hmm.
really get
Yeah.
the emotion of that moment. Like, that's very
well, it's
Hmm.
purposeful camera direction
And it
in
added to the
service of
emotion
the
of the scene
story.
for sure, but it's
Absolutely.
and the surface of, like, the actors and the performances. Like, it's not a major issue. The low budget being the big reason for that. It was just something,
Oh,
I kind of felt
yeah.
for
I mean,
watching.
I like that they didn't feel the need to do anything over the top, flashy or
Well, I don't
crazy,
need
but
to be over the top or flashy. Just
it's still well captured,
yeah,
and it was very much in service of what was happening on screen.
that's
And
true.
I
Well, and
thought,
it's a very like quiet picture. It's
Yeah,
not.
like, I don't
It's
need it
an
to be over the
interesting.
top and flashy. I just need
Sure, and it's an
something, I
interesting
guess.
sort of perspective from after the war, where you're talking about this is literally like after the war. Like this is like
Hmm.
these guys are going and delivering this news as these people's families are
Grieving.
they've been they're grieving. And so I think as far as the title of tonight's episode, I think this film fits in the best. I think it's the most relevant to that
mhm.
sentence, that sort of sentiment.
Hmm.
It's it is low budget. It's very constrained in what it's doing, but it makes the best of what it has. And I
Agreed.
think that a lot of the humor works. A lot of the characters are interesting.
Hmm.
There's some really we haven't even talked about the moment where Ben Foster's new love interest comes into this shopping mall and she's going to like just berate and attack this guy because he's like a recruiter at the army. I mean, it's
Yeah.
moments like that where you really feel the characters and you think, that's believable. Like you would, if you were that woman and you're, the father of your children, whether, he was abusive or not, just died, you just lost a loved one or, whatever relationship you might have had. You would probably tell some other kids to, get out of there too. And, I'm not trying to excuse her husband's behavior, but maybe he had PTSD. Maybe that's what he was battling with, that he didn't know how to handle, and it came out in these outbursts of rage. I don't know, but it's things like that that you can see. There are these little nuggets that you can take them and think on them, and it's like I don't know. It's
Yeah, I
appreciate
love
what
I
it's
love when
doing.
a story can maximize its little its minuscule budget by really implying story outside of the film in a way that's
Exactly.
believable, and that's how you really build upon the world that you're creating and showing
Well, and
when
that's
you.
the thing that I liked about this is that the characters are fleshed out, but they still have room to breathe. And
Hmm.
that was something that I was something that I didn't like about the Thin Red Line is
Yeah.
that every character sounds the same and they're telling you exactly what they're thinking and doing and how they feel about everything. And it's like this leaves a little bit of imagination, but they're still likable or they're still
Yeah.
interesting, and there's that, sort of breadth of like, wow, this is a little poignant drama. As
Yeah.
far as those go, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, it did kind of lose me towards the end though. Like I wasn't bored, but I was a little bit disinterested. Like we kind of went from more compelling drama to something like I've seen before. Like it's well done, but I've seen it done better in other movies, and it felt a little more generic than what it was going for in the first act and the first half of the second act. But
I can agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, and but on the other hand, it's almost 3 hours long, and it really doesn't feel that length, despite how initially like seemingly slow the movie is.
Yeah, you're
Outside
talking
of kind of
about
like my losing the interest in the second, third act, but the first act alone of this movie is so compelling and worth watching for
yeah.
this whole experience alone.
Well, you were talking about films that try to do this, and that maybe this is a little bit by the numbers by the end.
Hmm.
That you've seen films do this kind of thing better in some situations.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a film that doesn't do this kind of thing better,
Stop
and that's
bringing up
The
the English
English
patient.
Patient.
It's done. We're over with. We're beating a dead horse.
It is already dead.
Yeah.
Oh
Stop
God.
it. He's already dead.
Well, should we should we rate the
Yeah.
messenger?
Let's rate The Messenger. I'm giving it
Uh,
a solid 7.5 out of 10. The first act is a 9.
yeah.
Nice.
So 7.5 overall. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Feel comfortable with that.
I'm also gonna lean into a 7.5 out of 10. I think that it's. I had more fun with it and enjoyed it more than Ivan's childhood.
You had fun with it, did you?
Yeah, but no, it's a competently made, well done drama. I enjoyed it. I thought the characters were good and interesting, and it was such a breath of fresh air. The English Patient. Norm
Oh, yeah.
Macdonald, who we talk about a lot on this show, actually did a bit in 1996 on Weekend Update.
How
Where
does he keep coming back in the conversation?
I know. I did want to bring
He
this
might be
up
gone, but
because
he's not forgotten.
It's like
I
Leonard
did want to.
Cohen in our film studies class. We always found an
Yeah.
excuse to bring up Leonard Cohen. Now Norm Macdonald is
Well,
haunting us beyond the grave.
I do want to bring this up because I
Please,
forgot
please.
to bring it up earlier. His joke was the English Patient, secrets and lies and shine are currently locked in the best picture I'll never watch race.
Secrets and Lies is really good, actually, though.
I don't know. I don't care. Yeah,
Okay.
7.5 out of 10
We-
for The Messenger.
We gotta talk about Mike Leigh films at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Secret
Naked,
Lodge
yeah,
is one
we
of
need
them. And And Naked is one of them. Secrets of Lies is also up there. I
Um,
actually haven't seen all of that movie, but Naked is great.
Yeah.
We need to talk about that sometime. But yeah, no, I'm gonna give this film a solid 7.6. I think it's
Hey,
yeah,
Nice.
it's a really good movie. You know what? It shows a part of the job that doesn't get any light, and it's like the bitter end of one's.
Well, what were your
Um,
issues with it?
I mean, honestly, I have a hard time kind of picking any. Um, just off the bat, I thought it was yeah, it was a good movie.
Fair
I
enough.
think that it accomplishes what it sets out to do. And
Agreed.
I
that,
think so. I
yeah,
think that's commendable, and I think that's worth appreciating. There's
it's
some
hard
moments that
to
are a
be
little
mad
rough
at
around
it.
the edges,
Yeah,
like
definitely. Yeah.
like when the camera operator when the camera operator is zooming the lens, sometimes you see these little jerks in the lens,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I actually like seeing, just because it reminds me that there's a human person behind the camera, and I can imagine myself being there. When that
Fair
happens,
enough.
sometimes it's weird how like they think that makes it unimmersive, but for me, as someone that's operated a camera and made films, like it, I can picture myself being there filming it, um, which yeah, I find it more engaging, and I love the way they again use the cinema verite techniques during those emotional scenes, and they didn't feel the need to make it super flashy otherwise I thought it was a very competently made film and really underrated for the subject matter it tackles, and it's
Agreed.
really cool seeing Woody Harrelson take on more serious roles.
I agree. Thank you
Very
guys
cool.
so much for tuning in tonight. This was a great episode. So sorry about the wait, but I sure hope it was worth it on your end, because on Thursday, we're talking about our next fan selected episode where we're joined by special guest Daryl Ailes, who made this episode suggestion, where we're talking about Spring Breakers, mid 90s, and I already forgot the third film, but I'm sure it's important.
The Sandlot.
The Sandlot. Yeah, that'll be
Hey,
an
That's gonna be
interesting
great.
experience. Yeah,
definitely.
three very tonally consistent movies with no
Yeah.
drastic shifts in tone whatsoever. If you're listening to us live, feel free to join us in the Discord group on the Off the Air chat. But if you're listening to us for YouTube, have a great night, guys. And is it
Or if
Thursday
you're
or Tuesday
listening
yet?
to this on Spotify, when Ian uploads them on Spotify.
No, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Ah,
Stay tuned for Conan. Have a great night,
thank you
everybody.
for coming, everybody.
Stay